Thank you so much. All right. Good morning. All right, come on, we can do a little bit better than that. Good morning. All right. Listen up. First of all, let me say thank you. Well, I have a responsibility. Before I speak in every group, I always have made a promise to acknowledge the presence of a true and living God, and that is really who is the head of my life, and I'm committed to doing that before I do anything else. But I want to especially thank the Innovia Foundation, Shelly, Aaron, the whole staff. These 2 days conference, it's been going great, hasn't it? Yeah, give them a big round of applause. I mean, I didn't know what to expect, but, if y'all going to be doing this every year, y'all set the bar really high. So, you know what? They give me an hour, but I'm only going to need about 40 minutes, right? So what I want to do first, if y'all don't mind, is I want to do a little quick exercise. When I, as a stay-at staff person, they took us to this training, and they, not staff person, I went to a training with them, and they said that listening was probably going to be the most important skill that we were going to need to do this work. Now, I thought I was a good listener, right? So that wasn't a big deal. Then we went through this little exercise, and I want to do it with you real quick. It's only going to take 3 minutes, and it really is to just get us to a place where we can just be fully present and just listen to each other, because it's going to be interactive too, right? So how many people believe that you can hear somebody and not listen to them? Wow. Okay. Wait a minute. Let's be, how can you hear somebody and not listen to them? They said we do it all the time. Okay, so what we want to do first is we want to get everybody in the room listening, right? So I'm going to do a quick little listening exercise. No tricks. It's just a listening exercise, right? And in education, this is really the key. If you can get people's attention, that's the first one. And then you have to get them to listen. That's the second one, right? So let me try to do that first. So here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to tell a short story. If you know the correct answer, I want you to raise your hand. What do you do if you know the correct answer? Do you say it out loud? Just raise your hand. Just that simple. Okay, here we go. Johnny's mother has 3 children. The first child's name is Nicole. Everybody see him holding nickel up. Okay? The second child's name is Penny. Holding up a penny. Now what I'd like you to do is raise your hand nice and high if you know the name of the third child. Okay. Somebody who know the name of the third child. Who had their hand raised? Come here. Quick. All right. Now, we got a person who's actually listening. She knows the name of the third child. Raise your hand if you have no idea the name of the third child. Okay. Now, let's go. Did I tell everybody in the room the name of the third child? Now, here's what's going on, everybody. Right now, everybody in the room know the name of the third child. But because you're not listening yet, you don't know that you know. Does that make sense? That make sense? Okay, let's check this in. If you know something, but you don't know that you know it, do you know it? So that's a question, just something to think about, right? All right, so here we go. I want everybody in the room to listen to me, seriously. So I'm going to do the story one more time, okay? Who for sure know that who is absolutely positive they don't know who the third child is? Somebody who's absolutely positive. Come here for a sec. Yes. All right. All right. Let's just tell me the story again. Just tell the audience the story again.
There's 3 children, and one of them's name is Nicole.
Nikki for short.
Yeah, exactly. And the other one's name is Penny.
The other one's name is Penny. All right. Now, for those who were listening, is that the story I told? That's part of it. It's not all of it, right? Okay. Now, we're going to do this again, right? Everybody, what I need you to do is go to listening level 2. Because listening level 1, it don't always work.
It didn't work.
All right? So here we go. Listening level 2. All right, here we go. I'm going to tell a story. Raise your hand if you know the correct answer, okay? Ready? Johnny's mother has 3 children. The first child name is Nicole. The second child name is Penny. Now, some people are clapping because they're listening, right? Some people sitting next to you like, what are they clapping about? So now I don't got time. This is just really to get you present, right? So for the lack of time, for the sake of time, what is the name of the third child? Johnny. Which word out of my mouth was that? The first word out of my mouth. So you see how hard it is to listen? It's really difficult. You know what I'm saying? So one of the challenges that we have in this work is that we have to give each other the attention to be able to not just hear us, but to be able to listen to us, right? So I'm going to ask for your help, right? As you can see, I'm not going to stay up here, right? I'm going to move around the audience. I'm just going to be a little bit interactive. So I'm going to make sure I'm covering all of the points I just came to discuss today, because y'all only put a little bit of pressure on me, not a lot, only a little bit of pressure, but I really want to make sure I communicate effectively about what is going on in Buffalo. So if you see me and I'm getting too far off track, because I could talk about this all day, right? Say, Sam, go back to the list and check it off. Just remind me to go back to the list, all right? So I'm checking off number 1 and number 2, right? So here's what number 3 is. Yesterday, Mary, she said about context. I want to set context. Anybody remember what Mary said about context yesterday? It was a real aha moment for me. I liked the way she said it. So I wrote it down. So I'm going to repeat it. She said, our context is how we experience the content of our lives. That was interesting, wasn't it? I thought that was really, really moving, right? So what I want to do is I want to set a context. You have no idea how unlikely it is that I would be up here in Spokane doing this presentation for you today, given where I was at 10 years ago. So what I want to do is I want you to just do that with me for a second. Just think about where you were at 10 years ago. That would have been, this is March now? March 3rd? March 3rd, 2010. All right, just get that in your mind, all right? Because I'm going to take you back to where I was at. I'm going to take you back to where the city of Buffalo was at. March 3rd, 2010. Everybody got that in your mind? Somebody just holler out real, like, where were you at? Just so we can get a sample. Where you at 10 years ago? Where? You were in Miami. Now, who was in Miami? Raise your hand. When you were in Miami 10 years ago, did you imagine that you would be here 10 years later? Yeah, that's an interesting point, right? I didn't imagine being here 10 years later. But 10 years ago, today was coming. And some people prepared for it. Some people had a vision for it. They had a plan for it. They worked on it every day, and they got here and achieved their goals, right? I couldn't have imagined being in Spokane doing the speech that I'm getting ready to share with you 10 years ago because of what was going on in Buffalo 10 years ago. So I'm going to ask everybody as a set of context to think about where you would like to see Spokane at 10 years from now. Just kind of get that picture in your head, right? And I'm going to do it to you the same way the person who I got this from did. He said, think about 10 years from now and tell me, and I want you to be honest with this, everybody. Be honest. 10 years from now, based on what you're seeing right now, is the 20-county area we're talking about, is that going to be the better, same, or worse in terms of the opportunity for children, in terms of living condition, the economy, just in your own idea? What is it going to be 10 years from now? So they asked me that 2010 in Buffalo. My answer was with unequivocally, it is going to be worse 10 years from now. That was an honest answer. That I really believed that. It was going to be worse based on what I was seeing. And I gave that answer and I meant it. Now I'm asking you that. What is it going to look like in that 20-county area? If you believe it's going to be worse, raise your hand. Wow, optimistic audience. Honestly, nobody believes it's going to be worse. That's a good sign. How many people believe it's going to be the same? Okay, 1, 2. So only a couple people believe it's going to be the same. So I'm assuming, how many people think it's going to be better? Raise your hand. Wow. So my job is done. Okay. Really, what I'm here today to talk about is ultimately the work that we did in Buffalo from 2010 really to 2020 to determine to shape what Buffalo looks like now. But I got to be real honest with you about what was going on there. So I want to say, as I set this context, I want to tell you a little bit about what brought me to this moment first. After graduating from high school, I went to the United States Marine Corps. After I left the Marine Corps, I came back to Buffalo, and my children were in Head Start, and I became a parent leader, and I became the president of our overall policy council, and enjoyed that experience. My children went on to public school. We got to public school. We really didn't feel like it was meeting the needs of our children. We went on, we took our kids out, put them in private school. That didn't work. We took them out, we put them in homeschool. We homeschooled our children for a while. Then we found out the secret. Me and my wife found out the secret. And after we found out the secret, we put our kids back in school. And at the end, if you remind me, I'll tell you what the secret was, right? So we put our kids back in public school, and then I went on to become president of the PTA. As president of the PTA, I'm going to tell you the significant moment where I had to make a decision about what my role in terms of impacting the education landscape was going to be. The teacher, my son's fourth grade teacher, came to me and my wife. My son had a 100 average in fourth grade, and she recommended that we take our child out of the school. She said, you need to get your child out of the school. I said, and put him where? They said, you have to put him in a better school. This is not a good setting for him. So, you know, my wife listened. I didn't really pay attention because I was the PTA president. I'm not going to do that. Matter of fact, and then at the end of the school year, being honest with you, the principal told me the same thing. So make a long story short, my wife, the next year, because of an experience we had in the classroom, she said, we have to take our kids out of here. We don't have a choice. We have to put them in a better situation. And I felt really bad about that because I was in a position to do better for my children. But we had to leave a lot of children who were not a lot of children from our community who were not in a position to do better. And my wife said, Sam, if that's your crusade, fine, but we are responsible for our children. We have to do right by our children. And so we put our children in a better situation, but I committed myself to doing everything in my power to make sure education in Buffalo got better. And so I went on to become president of the District Parent Coordinating Council, the district-wide council. We began to fight to try to make things better. And I began to move up and begin to see what education looked like on every level. The governor appointed me as a parent representative on the Governor's Commission on Education. I was on President Obama's Community Leadership Council on Education as a parent representative. So I've seen how this thing looked on every level, local, state, national. And so in 2000, that all led up to 2011, and let me give you just kind of a picture. I'm going to be ready for the video and right after this story. So to give you a picture of what's going on in Buffalo in 2010. Buffalo, third poorest city in the country. We had a graduation rate that was fluctuating between 40 and 50%. We had 27,000 out of 32,000 students were in failing schools. We only had, out of our 60 schools at that time, only 12 of them were in good standing. And it was just not a good situation. That was what the situation was going on in Buffalo in 2010. So that led up to what Shelley talked about. So if we could put that video on, and I'm going to ask you a question after this video, right? I want you to in your opinion, because I want you to walk in my shoes for a few minutes before we talk about say yes. I want you to tell me after you hear this, why do you think we were organizing a boycott of Buffalo Public Schools? Why were we telling parents not to send your children to Buffalo Public School? Play the video. Of our children get a quality education. We keep hearing the words that the education issue is the civil rights issue of the 21st century, but that's more than just words. Because the same fight that we were fighting 50 years ago about separate and unequal systems, that system is here in Buffalo today. It hasn't gone anywhere.
the reality is we all know that if you were fortunate and your children go to City Honors, Hutch Tech, and Da Vinci, and McKinley, they all get a great education. They all have a wonderful graduation rate. So what we do is we take our brightest kids, our most talented kids, and we pull them out, and we give them a different education than we give everybody else. And we're happy for them. But the bottom line is that that's not all the children in the community. Right? All the children in the community deserve a top quality education. If you go into the rural and suburban districts, you don't see no criteria-based schools. You don't see us pulling out our smartest kid and our most talented children and sending them to a separate school. Because the reality is we know that when you go to those communities, your intention is to educate every child. So you have honors programs and arts programs in all the schools. So why is it in Buffalo we accept a system that does not give every single child honors programs and arts programs and all the best that we have to offer? Because at the end of the day, the responsibility to make sure that happens falls on us as parents. So we have taken the responsibility on. We didn't come here today to blame anybody. We came here today to say, listen, it's our children. Because the reality is, the people who have the money, the power, the influence, the means, they have already boycotted the Buffalo school system. As soon as the minute they get the money or the ability to do it, they take their money, their resources, and they go to where the best education systems are. And they leave us here with what's left, and then they have the audacity to say to us, go to school. You have to go to school because that's not the right thing to do. You're sending the wrong message to children. What message are you sending to children when you leave us and you go put your children in the best of schools and you leave us in not the best of schools? What message does that send? It clearly says that some kind of way all of us are not equal. All of us don't deserve a top quality education. And we as the parents disagree.
So that's where we was at 10 years ago. So people's opinion. What do you think the reason why we were organizing parents in 2000, that was May of 2011, to boycott the Buffalo Public Schools? Just go around. What do you think the reason why? Yeah. Why would we want to disrupt it? It was working for some people, but it wasn't working for us. So we said is it don't make sense for us to participate in a system that we know is not working and act like everything is fine when it's not. Anybody else? What's another reason why we were? That's interesting. We didn't think about it on that level. But because it was only a one-day boycott, but it was effective. It was 70% of the parents didn't send their children to school that day. So it was an effective boycott, right? Anybody else? What's another reason why you think we did that? Let them know it's a priority for parents. Stimulate change. How many people think a boycott will actually do that? Yeah, you know, I mean, the reason why I'm sharing that is because 10 years ago, we were desperate. And the mayor came to us. Say Yes was coming to Buffalo when this happened. The mayor came to me, and he said, Sam, we think we got a solution. We got a game changer. Say yes to education. We think this is going to be the thing that make the difference, and we see you out there protesting and organizing and everything, but trust me, this is going to make the difference. Now, the mayor's a great friend. I like him. You know, he's a good guy. You know, but at the end of the day, a politician tells you that something that's too good to be true, and it usually means, no offense, Mayor. You know, and I heard the mayor. I really did. He was optimistic. He was excited. But can anybody, if you were kind of in my shoes, why would you not be optimistic about a politician and, you know, other community leaders coming and saying to us that this is the thing that's going to change everything. It's going to make it better. We're going to be able to turn this school district around. Why would you think that I, as a community leader, as a parent leader, why was I not willing to even remotely believe that was a real possibility? Heard it all before. That ain't nothing new. What every new elected official will make that promise to you. This is going to be the difference. Every new superintendent come in, they say the same thing. We got the plan. And listen, just being real with everybody. I've been doing this for a long time. I told you, I've been a parent leader since 1990. I heard all of that stuff before. So when they came and they said that, we got the thing, say yes to education, I'm like, sure, right. I'm not going and telling my parent constituents, that this is the thing, because I don't believe you. I don't believe it's going to even remotely work, especially when they explained it. Go to the next slide. I want you to tell me, so that's kind of what was going on in Buffalo. Graduation rate was 48% at that time. We didn't have after-school programs in every school. We didn't have Saturday programs or summer camps. We had one parent center. We was out of compliance with the state requirements on parent engagement. We had, I told you, 27,000 out of 32,000 schools was in bad school. Our matriculation rate was only 57%, and we had decreasing public school enrollment. That's what was going on in Buffalo. Go to the next slide. Next slide. That's just to let you know the group of people that was involved in it. Next slide. All right. So here's what, go on. So I'm going to come back to that. Go to the next one. This is what the mayor came and said. What Shelley just told y'all, they had a Claudel Didactor who was great, the president of our community foundation. She came and she explained all that. And I listened attentively, you know what I'm saying? To the best of my ability, right? She said all that stuff. Go to the next slide. This is where I knew this was a joke. I'm being real. I'm being sincere when I say, they said this is the requirement. We're going to have city government. We're going to have county government. We're going to have a school district. We're going to have higher ed, community-based organizations, professional organizations, business, parents, religious, philanthropy. Everybody going to come to one table, and we all going to focus on education. Now, I've been around too long for you to tell me something like that. Those people are too busy. They're not going to spend time focusing on what's going on with our kids. Their kids don't go to the schools. They're just not going to do that. So I'm not buying into this. So they put together the operating committee. The operating committee, go to the next slide. That group right there in the center. They put together the operating committee. And here was the first test. The operating committee was made up of all those groups we saw on the previous slide. When they got to the table, they said everybody, every stakeholder had to have a seat at the table. That was the rule. We all had to have a seat at the table. The union didn't want us at the table. Why do you think the union didn't want parents at the table? Because we were disrupting the school district. And they felt like we was not doing nothing constructive. We were only attacking the school district, and they felt like we didn't need to be there because we had the wrong attitude to be part of the table. Say yes, being the honest brokers that they were. They said no. Everybody has to have a seat at the table. Now, I'm like, wow, let's see how this works. And believe it or not, they required them to let us have a seat at the table. And the union stayed at the table. So, okay, step one looks good. We all at the table for the first time. Let me say this. Let me just be honest with you. It was really the second time we was all at the table together, though, right? The first time a big banker in our community brought, anybody who know who Dr. Noel Tishy is? Dr. Noel Tishy, he was a Crotonville, GE. For people who believe that if you bring a business person in and we run schools like business, that'll solve all the problems, he was that person, right? So he came in and he, did a workshop on how we should run schools like business, and he had all the stakeholders there, and he stayed around for about, we met with him, he did workshops for about a year, 4 times in the course of a year. But, the first year workshop, everybody was there. The second workshop, half of those people was there. By the time we got to the third workshop, only 2 of us that was an original group were there, right? So, I kind of know how this is going to go, right? So we get to the operating committee table, and only time I ever really talked to the union president is on the front page of the Buffalo News. Really, I'm sincere when I told you, we don't talk to each other. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, Father, I was concerned his preoccupation was the interest of his constituents at the expense of our children. And there was nothing for us to talk about. And so we didn't talk. But all of a sudden, we are now at a table, and we are required to be there every 2 weeks. Now, listen to this. I know this ain't gonna last because the mayor gotta be there, the mayor himself, the county executive gotta be there, philanthropy, community-based organization, college presidents, everybody gotta be there. These people are way too busy to be there every 2 weeks. And so all of a sudden, we 6 months in, and every 2 weeks they're there. And this union president, who I really can't stand, is all of a sudden starting to sound like a human being. You know, all of a sudden I realize that, wow, we actually have way more in common than we disagree on. I didn't tell him that, but it was the truth. You know, he cared. He actually cared about the kids. He actually cared about the educational outcomes. And we never were in space long enough for me to actually hear that he did care. Now, what he did, how he dealt with his caring was very different. But so now what's going on in Buffalo is we are going through superintendents. I mean, literally between 2011 and 2015, we went through 7 superintendents and interim superintendents. So now, listen, this is how quick the turnover is going, right? And so, but here's what's going on special. See, this operating committee had people here who were smart, who understood way more than when we used to go to the table. It used to be the union, the school board, the school administration, and parents. That's the people that was involved in the education system. None of the other stakeholders were part of that process. So all of a sudden, you know, when we come up with when we got together, we came up with a plan. Working with Say Yes Education National, we came up with a plan about what are the goals that we want to achieve in Buffalo. We started to get the data. And I won't go through the details of all the stuff that's involved in it, but they started to give us the data about what was going on. They started laying out what the plan was going to be. And so now we 2 years in, and all of a sudden, you know, I get it, that, whoa, for the last 20 years, the only people that cared was that group I told you about. Now all of a sudden, you got business community at the table talking to us about what we can do. You got higher education at the table talking to us about the things we can do to improve education. You got philanthropy at the table talk about things we can do to improve education. And I can give you hundreds of examples. I'm not going to exaggerate, but I'm going to just give you a couple, right? So, for example, a problem came up. We had an interim superintendent. Interim superintendent did not want to pay for the transportation associated with summer school. $6 million transportation for summer school. She thought it was too much. She wanted the money to go to somewhere else, so she got a report from somewhere that said that children who go to summer school actually regress. As a result of going to summer school, they actually regress. And based on her report, they made a decision not to have summer school that year. And they sent a packet home with all the parents saying, go over this information with your students, and they'll do just fine. And that's what happened. The next year, we got to hire the superintendent. That superintendent said, that's ridiculous. You can't have summer learning loss. Summer learning loss is the reason why our kids are behind. We got to have summer school. So we started summer school again. That superintendent last 2 years, and she was gone. Then the interim superintendent came in again and said, we can't afford summer school. But now the difference was we had to Say Yes operating committee. And I watched how this group of people came together and began to work the problem. And up until now, this is over. Once the school board decides we ain't got the money, whatever they say is going to happen, that's what's going to happen. But now you had this operating committee that said, no, let's look at it. Let's work the problem. And I sat at that table for about 3 months while they actually sat there and worked the problem. And I mean, I can literally tell you the step-by-step process of it, but I'll just give you the quick overview. They said, what is the issue? So the issue is transportation. So what they decided to do is says for the children K through 6 who we are sending to summer schools, what we'll do is we'll put those summer schools in the local community church. where we don't have to provide transportation, and we'll just do transportation for the children 7 through 12. We'll build a partnership with the local churches. How do they know they can build a partnership with the churches? Because when you look at that operating committee, one of the task force we had was the religious leaders task force. So the religious leaders were already meeting. So they were at the table. So they talked about, we can provide a space in the community. Then we had the teachers union said, okay, well, we can make sure we have a teacher in every school. Then we can work with some volunteers in every church. And so when we came up, so I'm watching this solution be created. Literally, it was created. It was not something already done. Later on, interestingly, somebody said, oh, that's how they do it in rural communities. They use somebody really did tell us that. They use the church as a community, so that's what they do. And so all of a sudden, instead of us oscillating, now we are solving problems. Another problem we have, after school program. Even though we at the table working together in at least in a positive direction, we still had an issue because the union contract had a cosmetic rider in the contract for all of the teachers and their family. That because it was a self-insured district that was costing us $9 million a year. And we didn't have after-school programs. So we screamed and hollered about that. And you know what happened? We all came to the table and they worked the problem again. We needed an after-school program in every school. We had some schools that had an after-school program, other schools didn't have after-school programs. And the schools that had after-school programs, because they were SES programs, some was 1 hour, some was 2 hours, some was 2 days a week, some was 3 days a week. And if you're a parent and your children are bused to different schools, that don't work for you. It just was not parent-friendly. And so all of a sudden, Say Yes came, and they began to work the problem again. And we talked about what we needed to do to be able to ensure every single child got into an after-school program. And after working that problem with the help of higher ed, with the help of philanthropy, we came up with the summer camp model but then we expanded it out and we put an after-school program in every school. I can literally go and tell you 10 consecutive problems we worked out that way. So now, imagine the position I'm in. I've been telling my parents the whole time, what should they think about this Say Yes to Education stuff? What have I been telling parents? Don't buy into that. That's the same old promises they've been promising. It ain't going nowhere. It's going to eventually fall apart. But what's happening? First year, things get better. Second year, things get better. We go from a 48% graduation rate, Actually, the year before that was 43%, right? Then we go to a 52% graduation rate. Now, the 52% graduation rate ain't nothing to be proud of. But what is 52% compared to 48%? The next year, we go to a 58% graduation rate. The next year, we go to a 60% graduation rate. Jumping ahead, today, we at the highest graduation rate in the history of the city of Buffalo. 65%. But the important thing is it's not oscillating. It ain't making big jumps, but it's going in the right direction. And the reason why, at least in my opinion, is because instead of us attacking each other, instead of us fighting on the front page of the Buffalo News, all of a sudden you got people who are sitting down at the table who are committed to making education better in Buffalo. But more important than that, because like Shelley said, to come up with the scholarship, that's a good idea, but those scholarships by themselves, it's a commitment device, right? It don't necessarily work for everybody, right? In order to get the scholarship, what do you got to do? You got to graduate. So if kids are not graduating, what difference will it make about having a scholarship? So all of a sudden, now we are looking at the support services that are put around our children. They start talking about, how they found out what support services we need? Anybody got any? It was so beautifully stated yesterday. Anybody got any idea how they found out what the support services that would actually help our students, how they found out what the right ones were? Say that again. What a novel idea. Really, when he said this yesterday, when Doug said this yesterday, he said, boards that were diverse. He said, the diverse, do anybody remember what he said about the boards that was diverse? What did he say? He said they had more difficult discussions, but they made better decisions. So and I was like, I didn't have those words to explain what happened in Buffalo. But that's what happened in Buffalo. See, everybody ran away from the difficult discussions. Nobody wanted to have those hard discussions. Nobody wanted to talk about racism. Nobody wanted to talk about the poverty. Nobody wanted to talk about the urban-suburban divide. Nobody wanted to have those conversations. It was almost like it was every man for himself. That's how it was. And so all of a sudden, instead of every man for himself, we were at a table, and all of us were thinking about all of us. And here's what I mean by all of us. When they first came and said, the scholarship is for, who are scholarships usually for? It's a group. Some group gets the scholarship. And so they said, no, the scholarship is not for a group. Who's the scholarship for? Everybody. I thought that was interesting. I mean, at the end of the day, I didn't think that made sense because some people didn't need the scholarship, right? So why would we pay for the scholarship for the people who didn't need it? But you know what ended up happening? It brought people to the table who would have otherwise not come to the table. And they had something meaningful to contribute because they had skin in the game. And so what I saw is that, wow, all this work that, as Shelley was sharing, that was going on in Harlem, that was going on in Philadelphia, that was going on in Syracuse, all these years of experience, they had figured some things out. And so it was a reason why, it was a method to what they were doing. And it was a difference maker. So all of a sudden, by the third year, I became, okay, everybody, really, this is starting to look interesting. 3 years later, we going through superintendents, and all of a sudden, something happens in the community. You go into the community and you hear in the barbershop, the barber talking to the young man getting a haircut. What college you going to? See, he used to didn't ask that question. Why? Who got to go to college? Who got to go to college? Only those who can afford it. And so in Buffalo, that wasn't the majority of people, and it definitely wasn't the people in that barbershop. So that wasn't the conversation that was going on in the barbershop. But all of a sudden, because everybody gets to go, the barber has to be in the conversation. Churches are competing. Who are our singers? What colleges are they going to? You walk in the community, and the whole community is in a discussion about all of our kids going to college. I have no idea what that feels like when you've been going through years of people not even paying attention to our kids not going to college. Oh, somebody grabbed their ear. That means I'm talking loud, ain't it? Donnie was supposed to give me a cue when I was getting too loud. Okay. So ultimately, the change started to take place in Buffalo. What started to take place in Buffalo was this operating committee. See that community leadership council up there? That operating committee met every 2 weeks. Now it meets every 3 weeks. That community leadership council met every quarter. Still meets every quarter. So all of a sudden, everybody is getting the data. It used to be that data was like secret information. School district did not give out its data. They didn't want people knowing. Now all of a sudden, everybody, the whole community, get the data. We know how many kids are on grade level. We know how many kids are, how many schools are failing. And so all of a sudden you start hearing, okay, instead of having just 12 schools in good standing, we got 20 schools in good standing. We got 30 schools in good standing. Today, all of our schools except 3 are in good standing. All of them. You can clap for that. That's a big deal. If somebody would have told me 10 years ago that was even possible, I would have said no way. No, see, that's too big to even think that. When you got 27,000 out of 32,000 kids in failing schools, that's too big to think that. And here we are, less than 10 years later, and that's what's going on. People's opinion. What do you think happened? Let's just go raise your hand. Raise your hand if you got an idea. What do you think happened to cause that? Nobody got any idea what you think happened to cause that? Okay, good. Why do you think that worked? What do you mean? Wow, I like the way you said that. You know what? That's an interesting point. Because now everybody was in that conversation. It wasn't just the superintendent's fiefdom no more. Education was the whole community's responsibility, and the whole community was in the conversation. Superintendent couldn't get a haircut without talking to the barber. Okay. Anybody else? What else you think? What else is the reason why you think that works? Big one. See, you know, and this may not sound like a big deal, right? What I found to be one of the most challenging issues is what people think they know. This is a real issue, right? Every time a person says, I think I know, what are they really saying? What they really say is, I don't know. But they don't accept the fact that they don't know, so they want to tell us what they think. But the truth of the matter is what? They don't know. Two people who think they know something get into an argument. How long do it last? Why do it last so long? Two people who think they know and one person who actually knows. How long does the person who actually knows stay in the conversation? Why don't they stay in the conversation? Because they know some very important information. They know that you don't know. So I was telling them, I said, that's why parents are not engaged. They know you don't know what you're talking about. So you can't get them to listen to you because you're talking about what you think and you don't know what you're talking about. Nobody going to listen to you after they figure out you don't know what you're talking about. So you end up in a room talking to yourself. And the stuff you do don't work. But when you start listening to people and stop going by what you think, people are really good at being able to tell you what's going on in their life, what their reality is. And all of a sudden, we start partnering and the magic start going on. And I don't want to, as I bring this to a close, I don't want to even give the illusion that this was easy. This is, in all the things I've done in my life, this is probably the most difficult thing. What made it difficult is because every week we came there, every other week that we came there, it was always something new. You ever just wanted to get easy? You wanted to kind of get to where it kind of starts to happen by itself? It never got that way. It never got that way. Because when you're in your area of expertise, at a certain point, you can kind of do it blindfolded. This never got that way. Every year, every problem that we solved, it was another challenge. And so it was hard the whole time. But you know what was interesting is that in this difficulty, it forced us to come together even more to kind of figure things out. And I really got so many examples of how we came together to figure things out. And it was almost like a creative process. It wasn't no cookie cutter. We had to think it through. We had to try things, and we had to work together as a community. And it was the reward of seeing. I was at a meeting with this student, and she came up to the podium and she talked about the fact that she was going to college. Neither of her parents had been to college. And so she said that she had talked to her girlfriend's friend who were going to college, but she was for sure going to college, right? So I said, why are you so sure you're going to college? She said, oh, I got to say yes to scholarship. I'm going to college. But when she said it clicked in my head that, wow, independent of what's going on with her parents, she realized because the scholarship was there, that if she did the work, she could take responsibility herself to get her to college. And I was like, wow, look at that paradigm shift. Think of the paradigm shift. So here we are, 2010, this hopeless community, fighting each other, attacking each other, tearing each other down, on national news doing boycotts. That's what we were doing in 2010. Here we are, 10 years later, with a table where we come and we talk to each other. We put problems at the center of the table. We work through those problems. We have all those groups. When you talk about the business task force who give information, the religious leaders task force, the legal services, the post-secondary education people, the birth aid task force. I mean, all these different groups who are contributing to the solution. We ultimately get to this place where I heard him say this yesterday. He said one of the people from the tribe said that we're not self-sufficient. Y'all remember what they said? He said, we're not self-sufficient anymore. We're what? Anybody remember? I wrote all this down, so I'm going to bring it back to you. He said, we're collaborative sufficient. He said that yesterday. That was an interesting point. Somebody else said, this is not a success story. Anybody remember what they said after that? Say it again. Somebody heard that. It's a success in progress story. He said, somebody else said, all business comes back to what? Relationships. Today, Buffalo is in a hopeful situation. Everybody working together to help everybody is much better than we found it. So one of the most profound things I heard yesterday, Doug said it, and I want to end with that before we do questions and answers. Doug said, I have come to believe the greatest gift. Anybody remember what he said after that? It really moved me. He said, I've come to believe the greatest gift that you can give to a community is the ability to imagine its own future. Is that powerful? What I realize is that what Spokane is going to look like in the whole 20-county region is going to look like 10 years from now. What's going to determine what it's going to look like 10 years from now? Say it. I've heard it said before me, Dr. Osdale, he said to share a vision. I heard Shelley talk about the fact that we had to get a common vision. I heard Aaron talk about this morning, this common vision. If we all get a common vision, we all work together on that common vision. And I'm not suggesting it's going to be easy. My only job, Donnie is going to come talk to you about the details about Say Yes. My only job today was to let you know that I started in Buffalo and I didn't believe this could happen. And as far as I was concerned, in order for it to happen, it would have took a miracle. We were attempting to do the impossible. And all I can tell you is that if you get the right people working together on the impossible, sometimes the impossible becomes possible. And Buffalo is better because of it. Thank you.
I told you were not going to be disappointed today. Am I right? Sam is amazing. As I was listening to Sam speak, I know that there's some of you who are sitting here thinking, but we're not Buffalo. We don't have a 42% graduation rate from our schools. Why does this matter for us? I hope that you reflect on the last day and a half of information that we brought to you, and that you recognize that not only do we have an economic, but we have a moral imperative to make changes in our region. It is unacceptable for us to think that only 31% of our children are going on for post-secondary completion. It is unacceptable for us to allow 70% of our children to not complete some sort of post-secondary education. And so we may not have the same issues in our public school system that Buffalo had, but when you look around our region, we have the same challenges and opportunities that together, through a shared vision, that we can address. And we believe that exploring the opportunity, don't you leave. We believe that exploring the opportunity to bring Say Yes to education to our region is such an opportunity. I'm going to keep Sam up here because we're going to both field questions. I do have to point out two additional things. This isn't just about improving the data in our education system. When you look at the success factors around Buffalo and Syracuse, which are the two communities that have been around the longest, Syracuse, which has been around the longest, has actually closed the achievement gap. Yes. Students of color go on to college at the same rate as their white counterpart students. That's right. And you look at Buffalo, they've reduced the foster care placement rate by 42% in Buffalo. So it has a ripple effect on all of the community. And so when we think about how can we make those significant changes in our region, Say Yes is the opportunity. I'm not going to put Donnie on the spot to come up today. We actually have him in town. He's here, so if you want to chat with Donnie during one of our breaks, go ahead and track him down. He's here actually to spend a day with us tomorrow, and Sam, we're going to have several more community meetings where we dive deep into what does this really look like. So I know that we haven't answered all of your questions, nor will we, but we would like to open it up right now, and Aaron's in the back with the microphone, or you can just shout it out. What questions do you have for us that we can at least in the next 10 or 15 minutes spend time answering? Dr. Rushi.
This group or our group?
Your group.
So I'm sorry. Ask the question again. Let me listen. Say Yes to Education, and Say Yes to Education National. Again, like I said earlier, they have been doing this for 30 years. I mean, they had experience doing this. And so what they did is they were an honest broker. And what I mean by honest broker, our concern was that if somebody came in and they was union-centric or they was business-centric, they was on somebody's side. They came in, and because they required us all to have a seat at the table, and they clearly was on nobody's side, it kind of over time built the trust we needed to have among each other to be able to have the conversations. So they came in and they facilitated it for us.
Before we answer the next question, that actually gives me an opportunity to step in and say, let me tell you about our relationship with Say Yes to Education. That might help put some context into it. I heard about Say Yes to Education from the retired CEO of Baltimore Community Foundation as he asked me what was keeping me up at night. And I just said, we have an opportunity to think bigger for our region. And he told us to take a look at Say Yes. And when I took a look at Say Yes and went through everything, the results speak for themselves. The one thing which I mentioned earlier is that they've been one school district and one community. And so when we reached out to them, actually a year ago today, did you think we'd be standing here? I didn't either, which is great, right? So when we reached out to them a year ago and said, you have this phenomenal program, I said, but you're not thinking big enough. You're one community and one school district. We have 20 counties, 2 states which fund education very differently, and over 100 school districts, and we want you to come work with us to figure out how we can create a model of Say Yes to Education that works for our entire region that is going to look very different from the model that currently exists. So you're all in the creation phase, and we have spent the last year working with our communities and with Say Yes to explore this opportunity. We've had over 500 meetings with folks around our region on this initiative as we've done our exploration. And so this is the next step. You are in the creation phase with us. All right, questions? There was someone in the back. Yes.
Aaron Edwards with Erie County Health. What, if you can, what has your health care provider helped on the team there? What things have they brought to the group that have helped?
First of all, mobile health clinics, mental health clinics in every school. And they at the table. I mean, that's the most important one. It was a time where we didn't even have a nurse in every school. This is one of the advantages of having all the stakeholders at the table, because there were 2 areas where the district didn't have the resources to provide services, but the county did. So the county provided the nurses in all the schools, and they also took probation officers. Instead of putting as much money in probation, they converted them to what we call family support specialists, because a lot of their caseloads were in those schools anyway, and they put family support specialists in every school. So the healthcare sector, as well as the county and the social service sector, being at the table, were part of how we solved some of those problems.
Yes.
I was wondering, it sounds
Yeah, but we had to set rules.
The question was, were there rules that were brought to the table to ensure that there were not turf wars?
Yeah, we really did have to set rules. We had to have a whole range of rules. The first rule and it was difficult to follow, I'm being honest with you, because as a parent leader, to get certain information that you know and you want to share it with your constituents. You know what I'm saying? One of the rules is you could not, at the operating committee, you could not talk about the things outside of that room that was going on in that room. You had to respect the integrity of that room. The second thing that was interesting is that we had to agree on the things that we were working on. We couldn't take the information, go out and attack each other in the newspaper with it, which is what we used to do. I mean, that used to be our strategy. Find out your opponent's weakness and attack it. So we couldn't take advantage of each other's weaknesses like we did, and it made it difficult because that's how you organize. For the people who organize, you organize by lifting that stuff up, and so all of a sudden we had to look for how to help. Instead of how to, take advantage of it. And so, and then, some of that was baked in terms of the turf war stuff, because in the beginning, everything was under the control of the school district. So what happened is because, and it's really interesting. I mean, if you let me say this, and pardon, how I'm going to say this, because it's really kind of the first time I'm actually saying it this way. After being involved with this for 30 years now, I don't really understand how you do this if you don't do it this way. I mean, you understand what I'm saying? How do you have all these entities who have some skin in the game in the school district? We all are affected. Business is affected if you don't have kids that are coming out who can go into the workforce. The social services are affected. The political people's constituency are affected. Everything is affected by what's going on in our school district. How is it that how is it that you don't have a system that everybody is involved in the decision making? Now that we're on this side of it, it seems normal. Getting there was very difficult. But I don't have how do you run a school district, in a effective way, at least a school district like ours, without doing it? When everybody is in their, silo. And all you're doing is going back and forth, with people in their silos. It just makes it's irrational. But, most places I go, that's how they do it. And it's hard getting to this place where we all working together, but it's well worth the journey.
I have someone with a microphone in the back.
Thanks very much for being here and sharing your story. I'm curious about the secret sauce for longevity. Getting everybody to the table is one thing. As you said, keeping them there is the tough part. So how did that happen?
Huh?
That's the scholarship.
Well, go ahead. Share about the commitment device. Go ahead.
So you have two pieces of this, right? I said at the beginning, this is not just a promised scholarship. It's also about providing those academic and non-academic supports, which Sam has done a great job of talking about. The other piece of it, though, is that there is a scholarship, an independent endowed scholarship, and that scholarship committee serves as both the carrot and the stick, right? Those scholarships would not have gone to the school district if the superintendent hadn't been at the table. So in Buffalo, it kept the superintendent, the many that came through, it kept them at the table, because which superintendent's going to be the one that says, we're not going to be at the table, your kids don't need those scholarships. They're just not going to do it. So you have this opportunity called an endowed scholarship that supports and provides the motivational piece for everyone to come together and continue working in the same direction.
And we had one superintendent who thought about that. But, they had a real conversation about what the community would look like if them scholarships went away. And nobody was playing that. Everybody now got adjusted to the fact that all of our kids get to go to college. Nobody's trying to hear no superintendent. We'll replace the superintendent before we try to replace those scholarships. And then that became a part of the real conversation. And also, you got to understand that, mayors change and county executives change and school board. The people change, but because the system is now in place and the vision is clear for everybody, the new people come in, buy in, because they understand that's who we are. We went from a community that was not a college-going culture. That's just not who we were. It's a college. It's in the culture now. We expect our kids to go to college. I'm talking about everybody expect our kids to go to college. Now, some people go and they get certificates, but the scholarship pays for you to go get your certificate. Some people go to community college, some people go to 4-year college. So it ain't saying how you get your certification or your credential, but everybody know you can get your credential, and that's an expectation.
I'm glad you just pointed that out, because when we say college, it's credential, technical 2-year, 4-year. We're not lumping it. Someone has the microphone.
Thank you. So I've been participating with our school superintendent on an advisory group. And one of the points that came out recently was that 30% of the student population changes throughout the year. And that's in relationship to poverty, couch hopping, community hopping, and getting away from owing rent. So was there a parental capacity building component in this effort?
Yeah, and usually it's interesting that you say that, because that's usually what I focus on in my conversation. But because of who I was speaking to, I didn't focus on that. And so in the beginning, it was a real investment made into, building the capacity of parents. We went from 1 parent center to 4 parent centers. We put parent centers in every sector. One of the big problems that we had in our schools is that because the majority of our teachers, actually live in the suburbs, and when they go home, the school building closed. You know what I'm saying? So our school buildings closed basically at 4 o'clock every day. So you had this big, beautiful building sitting in the middle of neighborhoods, and you couldn't access it, at the end of the day. So what happened in the course of this process is all of a sudden they start opening those schools up in the evenings. They start opening those schools up on the weekend. And so all of a sudden parents start accessing the building and the school. We had lost our relationship to the school because most parents were bused outside of the neighborhood. So your school was not your community school. It was a school on the other side of the town. And so all of a sudden that school, which you couldn't go into if you didn't have a child in there before Say Yes came. After Say Yes came, they turned it into a parent center. The school in your neighborhood, you can go in it again. You can use it again. And it wasn't just for school stuff. You can go in there for the health clinic. You can go in there for the after-school program. You can go in there for the Saturday Academy. So the parents started to buy in, because all of a sudden, the things they were asking for years, people listened to them and started to put them in place. And so parents started to buy in. And once parents started to buy in, all the other conversations were easy to have. Once they started to have confidence that they were being listened to.
So often when we talk about the non-academic supports, it's actually finding that family support for those challenges that families are facing that are actually keeping their kids from being successful in school. So that is a component of it.
So I'll form this in the phrase of a question, although it's probably more of a challenge. In shifting from a focus on the gaps in public school systems in Syracuse and Buffalo to a 20-county region where there's a wide spectrum of educational opportunities, there will be a need to address private schools, charter schools, tribal schools, at-home academies, the whole spectrum, not just the public institutions. So would you like to respond to that, perhaps?
Correct. So I know that in the traditional Say Yes model, it's been focused on public schools. We've had those conversations with our Say Yes partners because we have a different philosophy, and we want it to be all schools and all children. Part of the reason that we've been having the conversations over the past year with different communities is that we need to make sure that we have those connections and relationships with all those communities. And I'm going to be the first one to say that we haven't reached everyone, nor do we have the answer for what this looks like for our region. Right? We have a model from which to build from, a model that has significant success and outcomes that we are in the creation stage. And our reason, honestly, for building up over the last day and a half the way we did and ending with Sam's conversation is to inspire you all to be engaged in this work with us. Because we cannot do this alone. This cannot be an initiative of Innovia Foundation. This has to be owned by our entire region. It cannot be an education initiative. It has to be owned by our business community and our nonprofit community and our church community and every parent and every individual in this region if we are going to make this happen. Yes. The question was where do the resources come for creating the scholarship endowment for the region? So that great question. They're raising the dollars for the scholarship. If you look at historically at the other Say Yes communities, is actually the easiest part of it. You may be sitting here wondering about the timeline. From now until the time of launch, it's typically about a 3-year process for the Say Yes communities. The hard work is around what Sam just talked about. It's about getting people to the table. It's about taking a look at the community assets and resources and how do we realign them so that we are actually addressing student needs where we have the gaps. And then on the other side, the raising the scholarship dollars, we will actually be going into a scholarship modeling process so that the amount that we have to raise is based on data, right? So there's a model that they have developed. We work with Schoolhouse Partners. They come in, they take a look at the data in our community so that we ensure that we raise a large enough endowment. They had to raise, how much in your community?
We had to raise $29 million.
29 million. In Cleveland, they had to raise almost 100 million in order to endow that scholarship. We won't know what that number is until we get the scholarship modeling back. But they said it takes about 9 months to a year to actually just raise the money because people are excited about that piece, right? I mean, you're excited about being involved in this major initiative. The hard work is the not fun, not sexy, difficult work that has to happen, right?
Sam.
Yes. I mean, you have other partners that come into play. In Syracuse, and I believe in Buffalo, the state of New York contributed to their scholarship model. They had large businesses that contributed, they have donors that contribute, they have individuals that contribute. So it's going to take a community.
And so when we initially started our endowment, we had to raise the $29 million for the 20 years. But the excitement of the success has led to us now. We're doing fundraising for what we call Say Yes Forever, to make it go on into perpetuity. And we have already raised $39,400,000 towards that. We got $60 million left to raise, but we got to get to $100 million, and people are investing every day.
Sam, you mentioned this briefly, but I think you kind of glossed over it. You've got all the stakeholders initially not working together. They all have their own special interests. They individually, each of them knows the final solution, but of course none of them do. I mean, how did you get them all to the table? I mean, did you not have any people that said, I don't want any part of this? And how did you corral them in to even buy in? Because it sounds like your situation there, unfortunately, not unlike many communities, that you've got these factions that just don't want to even listen.
Well, let me just say this. I mean, most of that credit goes to the president of our community foundation, Clodell Dedacker, who really, painted a very clear picture of what the opportunity was. And when it was all said and done, how do you say no to that? I mean, how do you justify not coming to a table and having a conversation about ensuring that every one of our children get to go to college and get a quality education? Even though I came, not believing it was going to happen, I was going to not come. You know what I'm saying? So I don't see where people could have got away with just, ignoring that table. And plus, a lot of the key players in the community were at the table, and it's hard to not be at the table when they're there.
Other questions?
Yes, a great question. She said, can I speak to anything, any changes I saw as it relates to mental health, substance abuse, and at-risk behaviors that still the children were facing? And we did something that there was an attempt to do something called a youth risk behavior survey to find out what the behaviors that put youth at risk, what was it going on in school. And the school wouldn't do it. They just wouldn't do the youth risk behavior survey. And I don't want to get into all the politics of the situation, but because we now had this operating committee where we can kind of work through all the concerns about doing a youth risk behavior survey, they actually did it. They did it for every child in every school. So all of a sudden we knew that, literally 40% of the kids had considered suicide, which was that number was unbelievable. We learned the number of children who were sexually active. We learned the number of children who were, trying drugs, experimenting with drugs. That was data that up until that point we just didn't have. Everybody was speculating on what that was. But they filled out this survey in school, so now they were able to focus the resources to where they were needed and have family support specialists who could follow up. And, then we had the clinics. And so a lot of progress was made because we were able to get that youth risk behavior survey done because of the operating committee.
Thank you. Other questions? No. No, the question was, has it been implemented in a rural community? And the answer is no. I would say the closest would be Guilford County, which is an actual county-wide versus just city. So we do have some lessons learned from Guilford County, but that's still one school district. So it's still a one school district model. Jeff.
What is the role of the school board in this process?
The school board is one of the main partners.
The governing body of the school district, et cetera. How did that progress over time?
Yeah, so the school board is obviously represented on both the operating committee, and the school board is represented on the Community Leadership Council. So ultimately, everything that's done in the school district has to be done through the school board. So they're partners in the whole process. But again, now we're at a table where the school board members are informed by a much larger body of people than when it was just the school board members making that decision all by themselves.
And when we haven't actually met with specific school boards as a whole. We've had school board members at our meetings. I believe we have met with almost every superintendent in our 20-county region. We've missed some who haven't been able to attend the meetings, but in both Washington and Idaho, and had those conversations with them. They're excited. And Shelley Redinger, here with Spokane Public Schools, both Shelley Redinger, Alicia Benson with Greater Spokane Incorporated, Christine Johnson, who's the chancellor of the Community Colleges of Spokane, both of them have actually traveled with me to the Gates Foundation as we've been having these conversations. They're on board and they're engaged. And it's important to have buy-in at the leadership level. So we do know that our school boards are part of the conversation. They just haven't as groups been addressed. Rich, did you have a question?
Just trying to ruin the microphone. Sounds like there's about 2 more years to go in the planning process, according to what you said earlier. Collectively and individually, what can we all do to help?
Thank you. I did not plant that question. I know you all think that I did not. On your table, you have actually a Say Yes to Education call to action form. And if you want to fill that out and be part of the work that we are doing, we would be grateful. We need folks, again, thinking about the size of our region and the size of our staff. We need folks who are... There is a hole in the stage. I like to walk around. Never wear skinny heels. We need folks who are willing to be those ambassadors in your communities, who are willing to step up and tell the story of why it's important for your region and why you want this in your region. Why is this important for your community? Only you can tell the story of your community as well as you can. We can come in and talk about it, but when you live in your community, you can tell your story better. So we need ambassadors. We need folks that are, we're going to be pulling together data folks who will help us actually do the scholarship modeling as we work with our partners at Say Yes and Schoolhouse Partners. So similar to what we did with the Locust Group, where we've pulled folks together. I have one of my board members raising his hand, so I'm forgetting something. Is the scholarship just for college? When you say college, do you mean?
Post-secondary.
It's for post-secondary completion. So technical 2-year, 4-year. Yes. Thank you, Bob. And so we'll be raising dollars for the scholarship. So we'll need folks that are willing to go out and help us be ambassadors on the fundraising side. We need people who are going to come to the table and be part of the operating committees in your local region. Has it been a long day and a half? So if you're willing to be involved, would you please fill out this form and we will be in touch with you. Yes.
This just seems like the issues
Yeah.
Microphone.
No, I'm with you. I mean, I think that's what happened in Buffalo. We really went from a place where people did not have a lot of hope to where, I mean, the hopefulness in the community is palpable now. My grandmother used to say, and I didn't know what she meant when she said it. She said, if two people exactly alike, one of them ain't necessary. Right. And I'm saying that because, I mean, she was making this point about how important it is to kind of find out who you are and be who you are. And when I listened over the last couple of days, y'all have a real special opportunity here with what y'all talking about. I mean, I don't think it's going to be like Buffalo or like Syracuse. I mean, y'all really got to figure out who y'all are and how y'all do it. Only thing I know for sure is that y'all got the right people in the conversation. And I know as hard as it is, if people work together and they care about each other and they care about the children, that 10 years from now, you get to decide what the community is going to look like, and you can make it better than you found it. And it's just really about just committing to it and doing the work.
And on that note, one more question.
Shelley, I just want to add one thing. In regards to the question that many people may have about how do you go about funding this, I will tell you, I agree. That is not going to be an issue. With the clients I work with, let me give you one example. In this town right now, and I can speak to Spokane because that's where I live, we have 3 centers going up. A new Joya facility for youth that have issues that need to be addressed at an early age. We have Vanessa Behan Crisis Center, and Ronald McDonald House is just 3 examples of campaign projects. Those 3 campaigns need to raise, close to $50 million. It's almost done for those 3. We're talking about this, our kids and the whole community, raising $100 million. It will not be an issue.
Wow.
It's a fait accompli.
And I'm going to build on that by saying there is a reason we shared with you the transfer wealth study today, right? So for anyone to say, there's no way that you can raise a $150 million endowed scholarship, there's no way. I would say, really? Did you see that we have $293 billion of net worth in our region? And $42 billion of that is going to transfer over the next 10 years? I think we can raise $150 million for an endowed scholarship for every single child in this region. So join me in thanking Sam Radford from Buffalo. Thank you so much, Sam, for ending our morning with us on such a positive and inspiring note. When we talk about creating vibrant and sustainable communities in our region, we know that it is possible. All we have to do is dream big. And we invite you to work hard with us and to take that dream for every county in this region. We are going into our final sessions. And for some of you, that means that you're done with us today. And we want to say thank you so much for spending a day and a half with us. We know that you're all busy people, and it's a significant commitment of your time. So thank you for joining us. On your table, you have your Say Yes to Education forms. You also have paper surveys for those of you who are tech savvy. You can do the online survey. I say that, I'm the one who asked for the paper form. And on the back of your program, you have the locations of the next concurrent sessions. So if you are a funder, we have a funders meeting in the presidential suite on the 14th floor. If you need a key, grab one of our staff. If you are in councils 6 through 10, the locations are on the back of your program. If you are in councils 1 through 5, you are going down to the Elizabethan room, and you're going to be at the Innovia at Work session. And if you are not involved in any of those, you're welcome to join another session, or you're welcome to have the wonderful day. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Have a great afternoon.
This major
I know.
hole on